Uber made $52 billion in revenue last year. Uber does not own the cars. Uber does not employ the drivers. Uber does not cook the food it delivers. So what is Uber actually selling? Uber's 2025 Form 10-K shows a company that looks like a ride-hailing app but behaves like three businesses stacked on top of each other: a marketplace that takes a fee on every trip and every order, a 50 million member subscription flywheel, and a fast-growing advertising business that just crossed $2 billion a year. This is how Uber actually makes money and why Uber is now betting more than $10 billion on removing the driver entirely. Uber looks simple from the outside. Open the app, request a ride or order food, and it shows up. But Uber's 2025 Form 10-K shows a much more deliberate machine. Uber generated $52.017 billion in revenue in 2025, up 18% from $43.978 billion in 2024. Income from operations was $5.565 billion, up 99% year-over-year. Net income attributable to Uber was $10.053 billion, including a $5 billion one-time tax benefit. Here is the number that explains everything else. Uber's gross bookings, the total value of every ride and every order that flows through the app, were $193.5 billion in 2025, but Uber's revenue was only $52 billion. The gap between those two numbers is the entire business model. Uber's first engine is the marketplace fee. For most rides and deliveries, Uber is legally the agent, not the service provider. The driver provides the ride, the restaurant provides the food, and Uber connects them and takes a cut. That is why Uber reports revenue net of what it pays drivers and couriers. In the fourth quarter of 2025, Uber's mobility take rate was roughly 29.9%. For every dollar booked on a ride, Uber keeps around 30 cents after paying the driver and covering direct costs, and passes the rest through to the person behind the wheel. Uber runs three of these marketplaces at once. Mobility, the ride business, generated $29.67 billion in revenue, with adjusted earnings up 22% to $7.9 billion. Delivery generated $17.248 billion in revenue, with adjusted earnings up 45% to $3.6 billion. Delivery's profit is now growing faster than the ride business. Freight, Uber's trucking marketplace, generated $5.099 billion, roughly flat. The second engine is Uber One, Uber's membership program. As of the first quarter of 2026, Uber One had 50 million members, up from 36 million in June of 2025, available in 30 countries. Members generate roughly 3 times the gross bookings of single product users and now drive roughly half of all mobility and delivery gross bookings combined.
The third engine is advertising, Uber's fastest-growing business. Uber sells ad placements to restaurants, brands, and merchants inside the app. The same screen you use to order a ride or dinner is now also a billboard. By the end of 2025, Uber's advertising business crossed a $2 billion annualized revenue run rate, up more than 50% year-over-year from $1.5 billion at the start of the year. Uber's model works because Uber does not have to own the expensive depreciating asset, the vehicle, to make money from it. Adjusted EBITDA reached $8.7 billion in 2025, up 35% year-over-year. But Uber's next phase comes with a trade-off. Uber is trying to make the driver optional. Uber has now committed more than $10 billion across more than 30 autonomous vehicle partners, including Waymo, Lucid and Nuro, Rivian, WeRide, Zoox, and Avride. Roughly $2.5 billion of that is equity investment, and about $7.5 billion is fleet purchase commitments tied to deployment milestones. Uber is targeting driverless service in up to 15 cities by the end of 2026. Here is the tension. Removing the driver could expand Uber's take rate, since Uber would no longer pass most ride revenue to a human behind the wheel. But it means spending billions today, before the payoff shows up. When Uber reported second quarter 2026 revenue of $14.19 billion, up 12% year-over-year, but including a $1.1 billion accounting hit tied to a UK law change, investors reacted nervously about margins during exactly this transition. Here is the Uber scoreboard. 2025 revenue, $52.017 billion. Income from operations, $5.565 billion. Net income attributable to Uber, $10.053 billion. Adjusted EBITDA, $8.7 billion. Gross bookings, $193.5 billion. Mobility revenue, $29.67 billion. Delivery revenue, $17.248 billion. Freight revenue, $5.099 billion. Uber One members, 50 million. Advertising annualized run rate, more than $2 billion. Autonomous vehicle commitments, more than $10 billion across 30-plus partners. First quarter 2026 revenue, $13.2 billion, with gross bookings of $53.7 billion and 3.64 billion trips. Second quarter 2026 revenue, $14.19 billion. The surprising part is not that Uber makes money moving people and food. It's that the fastest-growing, highest-margin piece of Uber's business is neither. A $2 billion advertising engine riding on top of a marketplace Uber does not even own the vehicles for. Uber's real product is not the ride. It is the marketplace that connects riders, drivers, eaters, restaurants, and now advertisers, taking a fee every time two sides meet.
The take rate is the first payment. Uber One turns occasional users into habitual ones. Advertising monetizes the same attention a second time without adding a single car to the road. And autonomous vehicles are Uber's attempt to keep the take rate while removing the largest cost on the other side of every transaction, the driver. That is why Uber can look like a transportation company, a subscription business, an ad platform, and, increasingly, a robotics company all at once. And why the risk is real too. If the bet works, Uber's take rate could expand for the first time by removing a cost instead of adding a fee. If it does not, Uber still owns one of the largest two-sided marketplaces in the world. Uber is not really in the business of driving anyone anywhere. Uber is in the business of taking a cut of $193 billion in bookings and finding new ways to take another cut on top of it. If you want more business model breakdowns built from real filings and earnings numbers, subscribe to Capital Breakdown. And comment, which part of Uber's model matters most? The marketplace fee, Uber One, advertising, or the self-driving bet?